Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this video is titled Great Lakes Biplane, Some Unfortunate Training Accidents. Now, the airplane you see pictured here is the aircraft that was destroyed in the landing accident. We're actually going up to the field and doing some patterns where the accident occurred. The accident occurred at Branch County Memorial Airport. Identifier is Kilo Oscar Echo Bravo, Coldwater, Michigan. Now, it's a nice airfield to do patterns on because it has both concrete and grass runways, and that's very important on a tail dragger that you have experience with both. Actually, it's much easier usually to land an aircraft on a grass strip than it is the concrete, because grass tends to be just a little more forgiving. You can slide a little bit more with the main gears, things like that. Now, I bought my Great Lakes, and you've probably seen some of the videos, November 727 Kilo Romeo. That's one of my favorite aircrafts, the Boeing 727, and also the 777 is my other, but all the good 777 numbers were taken. I could have had something X-ray, but that wasn't going to work. And Kilo Romeo is my wife's initials, Chris Rogers. So here we are coming in to do a pattern first on the paved runway, and this is interesting because the Great Lakes is probably one of the most forgiving aircraft I have ever flown. And you'll notice on my landing here, I've got very little time in the aircraft. It's a little bouncy. I'm hunting for the ground there, and look at that. I get a little bit of a porpoise. That's not a good situation to be, so I decided, enough of that. Power comes in, we're going around, we're going to go up and try it again. Now, I had not flown conventional gear aircraft, tail dragger aircraft for probably several decades of any significance. I think the last tailwheel aircraft I had a little bit of time in was the Boeing 247, and that's kind of a different story there. But anyway, the whole situation with not being current kind of concerned me, and I had a one of these Great Lakes 2T-1A-2s built for me. It's got a little custom-made plaque in there, and it was handcrafted for me, and they do a beautiful job of construction, let me tell you that. But this aircraft was handcrafted for me, and I took delivery on it in spring of 2022. So I've had it a couple years. I got about 50 hours on the airplane now. I've had it for 2 seasons, and thoroughly enjoy the aircraft. And like I said, it's probably one of the easiest tail draggers to land because with those struts, it is so forgiving, and it just handles so well in crosswind. So that's why these accidents are a little kind of confusing and unfortunate. But one of them was a crosswind accident. That's the second airplane I'll tell you about. That was a private individual who WACO was providing training for. 2 different instructor pilots. Both of them are no longer with the company. 21GL was their prototype. You can probably go on YouTube. I know you can go on YouTube, and you can find a number of videos where they're talking about this. And it goes back quite a ways. And they've made a number of nice advances on the construction and design of this aircraft. So 21GL kind of represented the old dynamics and didn't have as nice handling characteristics, flight qualities, and stuff as the newer ones. But the situation here, and it wasn't with the instructor I was flying with, although the instructor involved in the accident was the one who did the majority of my checkout. One of the things I wanted to do as part of the whole buying process, I negotiated that I wanted to get a couple of hours flying their airplane before I was getting checked out in mine. I just wanted to make sure that I could still fly conventional gear aircraft. It had been a while since I had flown one, so I just wanted to make sure, that I could do it. Well, I've got 23,000 hours of flight time. Most of it is in jets. I've got about 700 hours in tail dragger, so I was reasonably experienced, but, that had been a while ago. I had an aerobatic school and it used a Citabra and decathlon. That was back in the 80s when I was furloughed from the airlines. And now here we are coming in on another landing. This is my landing again. Yeah, see it, a little bouncy, but a little bit better there. Yeah, I do okay. I get it down. We're doing wheel landings here. And actually, wheel landings are easier than full stall landings. And the accident that occurred with this aircraft was a full stall landing. And you approach at 75 miles per hour, which is a decent approach speed. But this aircraft continues flying down to just over 40 miles per hour. Now, one thing about it, this aircraft was designed in the 20s, the 1920s, not the 2020s. This was designed in the 1920s, and things were a lot different back then. It does not have any artificial stall warning. There is no stall warning light, horn, anything like that. The aircraft stalls when you feel the aerodynamic stall. And okay, that can be an issue, especially for somebody who's very used to having that little stall warning horn going off when they're coming in to do a nice 3-point stall landing. Yeah, you don't have it. Now, the thing about that is, okay, it comes in at 75 knots. I'm sorry, miles per hour. It was miles per hour back then. I'm so used to saying knots. But it comes in at 75 miles per hour. And I found that if I'm going to come into a short field, well, I'll start slowing it back to 65. And I still have plenty of flying airspeed with the airplane, because it will fly right down in very nicely into the 50s and that, but that's dangerous. You got to be careful, because you can get into the stall, and of course stall speed increases with G. So of course, you know, you don't stall at a speed, you stall at a critical angle of attack. But as you apply G, that critical angle of attack, you know, changes. So one of the issues is you can be coming in, you can be flying very slowly into the flare, but if you pull that stick back, now you're commanding more G, more lift, and you immediately put it into a stall. So you've got to be very careful. And that is sort of the problem they got here. Well, the basic problem they got on the landing was they just got too slow, and there were some really inappropriate inputs. And I'll read from the Aviation Safety Network report. It says, the flight instructor who was seated in the front seat, and that's another thing about this. When I taught in the decathlon, I'm in the back seat. I've got about 500 hours of instruction in the Citabra and decathlon, and it's in the back seat. And you can see a lot better really from the back seat. Now in a tail dragger, you can't see much of anything when the tail's down. You got to bring that power in. If you've got a metal propeller or a heavy propeller, you get a noticeable shift to the left as the tail comes off, because you've got the gyroscopic effects. Now this has a composite propeller, and I noticed that the effects, the gyroscopic effects as you bring the tail up, seem to be less. You don't have to put in as much right rudder, but you know, at that initial part, which you'll see here with the tail down, you can't see very well. So you've got to look laterally, and I've got plenty of time instructing from the back seat of a number of aircraft. The T-38, you could see even less from the back seat than this aircraft, and in the F4, you could tell you're lined up with the runway if you couldn't see it from the back seat. But okay, we get on the runway here. Now you apply power, you have to look out the sides, make sure you're going straight, and when you bring the tail up, now you can see. Now you get the thing in a level attitude and you can accelerate. Now the narrative on this accident says that the flight instructor who was seated in the front seat and the pilot receiving instruction practiced 3 landings on the hard surface runway in a tailwheel equipped airplane, which is what the Great Lakes is. The flight instructor reported that he then asked the pilot to conduct a 3-point landing on the grass adjacent to the runway. And that's what you're going to see here in my flying. That's where you go next, is the grass strip. And the instructor reported that the pilot got high and slow. Yeah, you don't want that. You always want to be high and fast, right? A little bit of aviation humor there. But he got high and slow on short final, and the instructor told the pilot to lower the nose and add power. The instructor stated that the pilot was slow to respond and pulled the nose up, stick full aft for the landing. The instructor stated he was too late to add power, and the airplane stalled about 5 to 8 feet above the grass. The main gear collapsed. I mean, I've come down with some pretty good sink rates. If I would land with some of the sink rates I've landed the Great Lakes in a Citabra Decathlon, J3, almost anything of that nature, and I mean a J3 with spring gear, because the bungees are a little more forgiving, but this airplane will take a lot of load. So if he hit hard enough to collapse, he must have really stalled from a pretty good altitude. But the gear collapsed and the airplane nosed over, and they both reported that there was no problems with the airplane. The pilot receiving instruction reported that while over the grass parallel to the runway threshold, he began to flare the airplane. The instructor stated the flare was initiated too high, but to continue the landing. The airplane leveled out, and the instructor stated to keep pulling. The pilot reported the instructor began to manipulate the controls with the pilot, and the instructor pulled back on the control stick. Okay, all things that are not going to aid this whole situation. The airplane entered an extreme nose-high attitude, stalled, and impacted the terrain. The airplane sustained substantial damage to the vertical stabilizer and rudder, and the probable cause is listed as the pilot receiving instruction, improper flare during landing, and the flight instructor's inadequate remedial action, which resulted in the airplane exceeding its critical angle of attack and experiencing an aerodynamic stall. Now, it's kind of interesting here. As an instructor, you have to intervene in a timely fashion. You have to, you want to let the student get the full experience, but you gotta keep the aircraft under control, and you can't let things get out of hand. So that, unfortunately, is an issue. When I was a beginning instructor in the Air Force in the T-37, here we come in the grass, and I'm still just a little porpoising here, because I'm still trying to figure out where the ground is. But the grass tends to be more forgiving. Now, one thing with this grass strip here and the way the trees are, it gives you a little bit of a bowl effect, in that it's like you're landing in a little bit of a bowl, and when you're looking out to the side, you see the trees and stuff come up, and you get the perception that you are lower than you actually are, and that can add to the whole situation and the whole accident scenario, and that might have been part of the cause. It was needless to say, a very unfortunate event. But as I was saying, when I was a brand new instructor in the T-37 as an Air Force pilot, I had, what did I have? Probably less than 300 hours total time in anything, and not much time as an instructor. They read an accident report where a student came in this was a twin-engine piston type transport aircraft, but he comes in, he lands hard, he collapses the gear, the aircraft starts to go off the side of the runway, and just as the aircraft goes off the side of the runway, the student yells, "You've got it," to the instructor. Well, of course, as instructors, we kind of laughed at that, because the instructor obviously should have come in a lot sooner on the controls and saved it, but the student was doing his good part in telling the instructor he had it, throwing the controls back to the instructor. Now, as I said, it's hard to see from the back seat on forward visibility, but I think there's another problem with this aircraft in the front seat. The fact that you've got a short nose there, and you still can't see forward also, but you don't have a lot of good lateral images. You've got to look out to the side, and typically you shift your head back and forth. I think instructing in this aircraft in the front seat, to me, is a lot harder than sitting in the back seat if you were instructing it. But of course, you fly the aircraft. The aircraft is flown single pilot from the rear seat, and that's where I've flown it. I've actually never flown my aircraft from the front seat, because I haven't had an instructor, who would be qualified it. And I'm not. The insurance won't cover me for giving instruction in my aircraft, and I had thought about it, but I'm doing some instructional videos that I have posted on YouTube, which you may or may not have seen. But anyway, so I think the instructor in the front seat is at a bit of a disadvantage. And the other thing is I have nice toe brakes in the back seat. In the front seat, you have heel brakes. And I've flown, the Sabre I used in flight instruction had heel brakes. And you get used to them, they're fine, but they're not at all as easy to use as standard heel brakes are. Now let me tell you about the other accident. It involved this aircraft, which is 53GL. A private individual had bought this aircraft and was getting Great Lakes, one of the instructors, to check him out in it. Now, they were doing touch and goes on the main runway there at Battle Creek, and the analysis says the pilot was receiving additional flight instruction in tailwheel-equipped aircraft. During the landing with a crosswind, the airplane bounced and then settled onto the runway. The airplane veered to the right, so the pilot added left rudder, but over-controlled to the left. The pilot then relinquished controls to the flight instructor. The flight instructor was unable to regain control, and the airplane ground looped. The airplane sustained substantial damage to its lower right wing. You don't have a lot of clearance on the wings here, so if you ground loop at all, you're going to catch one of the wings. But the problem was it got the lower right wing and rear spar and aileron. Both of them reported there was no mechanical problems with it, and the complete accident report cited the pilot's failure to maintain directional control of the tailwheel-equipped aircraft during a crosswind landing and the flight instructor's inadequate remedial action. And this is the aircraft that was actually on display up at Oshkosh. And they were trying to sell it. And I actually considered buying it, but I decided I wanted to go with a brand new aircraft. I wanted once in my life to actually own a brand new aircraft. So I did, and that's my story of how I almost bought this aircraft. It's being rebuilt, and I think at this time it has been rebuilt, and it will fly again. But one thing I noticed with the Great Lakes airplane in particular, and I noticed this myself when I started to get, that's dangerous when you start to get a little confident, that I sort of was not flying it all the way to the chocks. And on a tail dragger, you have to do that. And I was getting slow, and I started to get, I'm down to almost just above taxi speed. And I started to diverge a little bit. And of course, there you really got to get on the brakes because you don't have much rudder effectiveness unless you give it a shot of power. So I had to get on the brakes there, and I go, okay, that's a lesson for me. Don't let yourself get complacent because it will bite you. So like they say, you fly a tail dragger all the way to a full stop. So these were two unfortunate accidents involving company pilots. Both of them no longer work for WACO. WACO has got things back together, basically. They've got a flying prototype now. They've got a backlog of people who want to get demonstration flights, so because you want to fly the airplane before you buy it. But anyway, they're getting back in order, and they've got a backlog they're going to clear. So I hope you found this instructional, informational, and enjoyable. Thanks for watching.